So again, it doesn't happen. No place that, if you open one slit and then you add the second slit, no place gets darker. There's no evidence that happens.
So here's a double slit with one slit blocked. Now let's go and have a look at the pattern. Put light on. So a single slit pattern. Over that decimeter from that arrow to that arrow. That's the central maxima, isn't it? Okay. So 10 centimeters, 1 decimeter. Now, make a mental note of where we have light. All across that distance, don't we? Now, I go back to the double slit. And let's unblock it. Let's move the blocking it. So now we're just looking through both slits. So now, we still have that same single slit envelope pattern. Between there and there, it was all light before. Now, we have no light, no light, no light, no light, no light. So Richard Feynman wasn't lying.
So that's the one they never prove. They have no experiment demonstrating. There's no hope that that could make sense or be correct. So they're asserting it as a fact. So this is the mystery that has to be solved, is this fake, phony mystery that doesn't exist as a real fact. So you're accepting a false notion of an outcome that just isn't correct. It's not based on science or evidence. It's based on an assumption, based on a wrong, a misplaced drawing. So there is no, it was bright and then I opened a second slit and it got dark. There's no evidence that happens.
Would you like me to magnify that for you? If you can't see these gaps where there's no light, I do worry about your eyesight, but just let me magnify it for you anyway. We have darkness where there was light before. Can you see? Double slit, obviously. Now try and make it into a single slit. Block off one of the slits. Is that it? 2. I'm trying to block off one, not both. We blocked off just one there. Right, so we blocked off just one there. So you can see we now have light where we didn't have light before. Let's come back again so you can see. So we have a single slit now, light where we didn't have it before. We open up the second slit and we have places where there's no light. Hang on. There. So now there are places where there are no light by opening up a second slit. I'll put the magnifying glass in front of it again. If that, there we go. So we have darkness where we had light before. Zoom in. Try and see any sign of light in the dark places. Go it again. Done my best.
So again, it doesn't happen. No place that, if you open one slit and then you add the second slit, no place gets darker. There's no evidence that happens.
So the area we are interested in is this bit in the middle, yes? Gary reckons that this bit in the middle isn't actually darker than it was before when it was a single slit. He reckons that this is the same brightness as it was before, that it only looks darker by comparison to the maxima either side, which are now 4 times intensity. So if it's an optical illusion, then we can destroy that optical illusion by blanking out the maxima. We can blank out the maxima, yes, so that we're no longer distracted by the optical illusion, if it is an optical illusion. So we can see the bit in the yellow, we can see that for what it actually is, yes? So let's take a snapshot. So that bit in the yellow is supposed to be the same brightness, according to Gary. That bit in the yellow is supposed to be the same brightness as it ever was when it was a single slit. It hasn't gone darker just because we made it into a double slit. So let us test that hypothesis out by swapping it with the other drawing. Now I have to expand that drawing though to the original size marked by those arrows. Sorry, you can't see the 2 arrows. I mean, I put 2 arrows at the top of the page so I could align the 2 pictures and make sure that they stayed in the same position when I enlarged them. Okay, that's with 2 slits open, and I put 2 arrows at the top of the page so I could align the 2 pictures and make sure that they stayed in the same position when I enlarged them. So it's the same brightness, Gary reckons, but it doesn't look the same brightness to me. No. Take a snapshot of that. So Gary reckons that when we open up the second slit, that doesn't go darker. that bit in the yellow area does not go darker. But go back again. But I reckon it does, don't you? Now let's go back again. This one, expand it back to the same dimensions. So again, there you go. A, B, just to be clear. Okay, that's with 2 slits open, and
snake oil salesman mouth. And on the one hand, he'll say that these dark bands in the double slit are never totally dark, and therefore the argument that open...
They aren't. So, okay, so let's just say, is that a fact or not a fact? Oh yeah, that's right, it's a fact. But anyway, let's continue.
A second slit causes less light to reach this point is invalid because...
So a second slit, so he's going back to an experiment already debunked. So there's this theory in physics that's never been proven, never been demonstrated by anything called evidence. There is no evidence anywhere that this thing happens. He's claiming it does happen and he has proof, but he has zero evidence. So it's been cited by lots of physicists, just like they cite photon detectors and all that stuff. No evidence anybody ever made a photon detector for a slit experiment. No evidence that ever happened in the history of physics. Because frankly, no physicist would be stupid enough to think it's possible that you could watch a photon passing by. Okay, no physicist thinks that's possible. I mean, no one that went to school or got an education or a degree, no one believes that's possible. So of course they never did it. And yet, but they talk about it. It's one of their fables. It's one of their little stories in their religious thing, you know, where they have those little stories about what David did or this guy did or that. These are little fairy stories they tell, okay, in their religion. And that's all it is. So in the double slit experiment, there's this theory, okay, this contention, this whatever you want to call it, this bullshit that they made up. Okay, so this is there's distances between these. Well, I'll put them in as accurately as possible. Let's just do it the way it actually looks. All right, so let's just say we have 4 things in the middle, then we have the dead spot, and then we have, you know, 2 here, and we have 2 over here. Okay, and that's pretty much accurate enough. So they have this contention that, okay, so I have the slits here, 2 slits, okay, that's pretty obvious, right? Can't confuse it. And they have this argument that if I have them both displaying and they're both no, I just open one, so I close one of the slits. Their theory is, okay, that there'll still be some sort of pattern, you know. I would argue there will too. It'll be something like this maybe, okay. And what they're arguing is that when I open this other slit, right, so this spot, when one slit is covered, they say this location is light, and this location is light, and this location is light. So unlike the double slit where it's a dark, they say it's a light. All right, because when I close, so when I close one slit, this is the pattern. If I close this slit and open this slit, the fact is I'll get, the pattern's going to be in almost exactly the same place, right? Because this distance isn't enough to change it, so it'll look like this. Okay, that's how they're going to look like if I open them as single slits. Okay, but when I open them as a double slit, I'm invoking this longer distance, see, and that's the key distance to making the little bars. So anyway, so it really doesn't matter which slit I open or which slit I close. This is what the pattern is going to look like. Now they think, you know, Feynman will draw it. Feynman will draw this like that. You know, he'll draw, well, this one will make a hump over here, and then this one will make a hump over here. You know, that's how they'll draw it. So even though it's only a millimeter of distance, this entire experiment, they think that these 2 patterns happen way over here from each other, like they're way off center. But anyway, that part doesn't matter. So back to the point. So obviously this is a continuous pile of light. So there's actually, so when one slit is open, their argument is that there's light going to these locations. And then when they open this, that light disappears. All right. So there's zero evidence that's a truth. No credible experiment. Now the only one he linked me to was a Christian scientist, a physicist who's a Christian. And the experiment he did sucked. Okay, we got no details, saw nothing, and he was using an electronic filter. That is something that only accepted photons that came at a certain speed. So if I actually made more photons, it would register fewer photons, because the more photons I make, the more it cancels them out because they're too close together, if you get me. So he had a filter imposed that actually canceled. When I open the second slit, it's actually canceling the light. So of course, that's how it looked. But anyway, so completely fraudulent. I mean, you know, you can't trust Christian physicists, get real. But anyway, you know, complete fraudulent experiment. So I already have the video up. I've already done this debunk. And here he is raising the same argument as if he has one shred of evidence anywhere in the annals of physics demonstrating that this actually gets darker. The truth is when you have one slit open, you're only getting light from one source. So if they were heads and tails you were throwing at the wall, you have two sources, obviously, I'm arguing. And so you're throwing heads and tails from just two sources. When you double the sources, you quadruple the capacity to make matches. And so it's just completely untrue that if I close one of the slits, a spot that was light gets dark. It never happens. It's just that with the single slits open, these two patterns are so faded, okay, that you really don't see what's happening. And when you do combine them, when you open both slits, it's like you added 4 of these. All right, now you have 4 times the potential to make a matches. All right, and so now the spots that do match get much brighter because there's 4 times the number of capacity to make matches. So these spots get much brighter. They get 4 times brighter when you open the second slit. The light spots get 4 times brighter. That makes this look darker, but it didn't actually get darker. So again, it's just another one of their complete. So again, this is the university graduates 8 students, and they have a professor that they're paying presumably some kind of decent salary. So you do the math and you figure out, well, what's the agenda of this university, right? 8 students can't possibly justify their budget. So what is it, a Christian university? I mean, what's the game? You don't have a physics department that graduates 8 students unless the students can afford $100,000 a year. So clearly something's wrong with that picture. Christian propagandist there.
Just play this in full screen. So right now he has 2 slits open. And then
okay, so let's understand that the principle is when 2 slits are open, there's 4 times as much light where the little balls are. So I would argue 4 times. Maybe he would argue 3 times. I don't know what his argument would be, but the ball should be much, much brighter. So when there's 2 slits open, the little balls are much brighter, and this little place in between them should be much darker. Now the reason why there's little circles, is because they got the laser too close to the slits, and so the laser isn't spread enough, and so it's not producing it even over the whole thing, kind of over the slits, and so you're getting actual images of the little balls, right?
Cover one of the slits with an index card. And when he does, these bands were less light.
Real untechnical experiment, right? And the device he has a little option that allows him to do that very precisely. So why is he doing it with an index card? I have to ask the question, right?
Just reaching the board.
And you would imagine the single slit is the single impediment has to be fairly small. So this idea of you're sliding this card in there, the paper fibers alone could be creating interference.
They're going to get brighter. More light, so reach those points.
Says him. Okay, we're gonna get there. There we go. So this is the best they can do, right? I mean, this is the simplest experiment. It's only 2 slits and a flashlight, essentially, right? That's all you got. 2 slits and a light source, and some place to display it. Wow, real complicated experiment, and look how bad this is. Look how desperate it is. So this is the foundational nonsense for all of pretty much the woo of quantum mechanics is built into this experiment. Many of the physicists will concede that point. And so we're arguing over a principle where they're saying that, okay, there's light hitting a surface, okay, and that magically, okay, with one slit open, and magically when I open another slit, I let more light in, okay, that this part here, and this part here, and this part here, and this part here go dark. That there's no photons hitting there anymore, okay, and so that is a dramatic statement to make. That all of a sudden photons that were doing this and doing this and doing this and getting all these places, all of a sudden aren't getting to those places because I opened another slit. All right, and the point is though is that these places are 4 times brighter, 4 times brighter, 4 times. Now maybe by his logic it's only 2 times brighter, but let's just say 4 times. For the sake of that's my argument. So 3 times. Yeah, 3 times would be enough. So we'll just say 3. I could change it to 3. Yeah, 3. We'll just say 3 times brighter. So it's more than just adding the 2. It's not 1 plus 1, and that's how much you get. No, it's 1 plus 1 equals actually 3 in this case, because you're putting together parts by my theory. But anyway, the point is these are supposed to be really quite bright when 2 slits are open, and this is supposed to be dark. So with that, let me just play his. But again, this is foundational to all of quantum mechanics, and this is the best he can do in providing me their proof. In searching the internet, this is the best he can come up with as a look. You have to believe. So this is their have to believe evidence. If you don't believe, I can insult you, I can call you a crank, I can insult your intelligence, I can do all these things, call you a truther, call you a science denier, I can call you all kinds of names because I don't accept this as proof of something. I mean, that's how ludicrous their argument is. That's how bad it is. I mean, if this isn't the Inquisition, what is it then?
I mean, it's just as badly founded. He makes jokes about, you know, whether witches float. And what is the difference here? He's saying he can insult me because I don't find this compelling evidence. Amazing. So this is the dramatic, you know, look how dark it got. Well, it didn't. All right, so let's understand. This is, first off, we don't know what kind of auto exposure is on the camera. So, right, this is already a problem. You know, whenever you're doing this kind of stuff, filming it, you have to remember to turn the audio exposure off because it does screw up what you're trying to observe as a technical matter. It keeps recompensating for the amount of brightness, and so it fools you. But anyway, so let's, yeah, that's another one of the obvious things. Like, oh, the physicist has to have that explained to him. Shit.
Okay, and if we zoom in really, really close here, you can see the effect even more.
Yeah, so I don't see the effect even more, okay? Personally, I don't see how, oh yes, it got much brighter when I closed one of the slits in between, you know, in this little spot here. You know, I closed one of the slits and it gets brighter in the dark spots. You know, I didn't see that. So he's going to magnify it even more now. Yes, this is the brilliant part, right? Which you'll really be able to see. All right, so watch the two sides over here. Now, these are supposed to be getting 4 times brighter when the circles are there, right? 4 times, or at least 2 times by his own argument. So the 2 other sides are supposed to be getting twice as bright as the other thing gets dark. So for all the light you lose in one place, you're supposed to be gaining it in the other place, plus more. Okay, so, but do you see any of that? Watch this dark spot here, and watch this light spot, watch this one, watch this lump. See if they change at all. And if they don't, then obviously something's wrong.
Okay, so let's watch it again.
Let's watch it.
Some more light, watch it darker, now it's lighter.
Yeah, so what did you see there? Did you see any of this stuff change in any dramatic way? No, it didn't change in any dramatic way at all. It's supposed to be more dramatic, right? It's supposed to be getting much brighter, you know, in one state than the other. So, I mean, I would make the obvious argument that the only way you can't, what you're seeing is the audio exposure on the camera adapting to the bright spots and just measuring them. And so, yes, this gets darker because they compensated for this.
It's darker, now it's lighter again. Okay, so that should not be possible.
Right, okay, so that's his evidence. All right, so we're to believe in magitons, you know, their little, whatever it is, their whole little magical theory that the photons that never interact with each other anywhere else magically interact with each other when they go through a slit. Oh, that just totally changes my identity, and I totally change into wave functions, and I totally do some probabilistic math and figure out what, so I have to believe all that crap based on that as evidence. And he says, I'm an asshole, an idiot, some kind of fucking cranky moron because, oh, I don't find that very compelling. I don't find this picture of Mary on your toast all that fucking compelling, retard. You don't think you have to do a little better than that? You have a wooey theory of magic, and this is the evidence of your fucking why I must believe in your magic verse. And so let's understand, this experiment is so simple, right? And in the text, he's talking about an entanglement experiment, right? So they can't even get this experiment right. They can't even do this with any technical precision. And you trust them on LIGO and on their cyclotrons and all this other crap. You trust all of the assumptions they make about those experiments when they can't even make assumptions about this one that have any credibility. I mean, you can't get simpler. 2 fucking little holes and a flashlight, and they can't do that experiment with enough precision to come up with better than this, you know, look at Mary in my toast evidence. All right. It's pathetic. All right, continuing.
If you assume that light is a classical particle.
So again, this whole argument that I'm arguing a classical particle, there's no such thing as a classical particle. This is your kind of language, it's kind of crap you say, right? The photon isn't a classical particle in the sense that the photon isn't, as I pointed out, I've always pointed out, has always been a ray, has always been a composite. It's not a particle, fuckhead. so right there, I mean, and this whole idea of what classical is, when the classical description was Huygens. The classical description is full of wavy bullshit. So it's just such a lie. Oh, disgusting. They play these games. You're the one with the archaic theory, shithead.
And then it actually gets even worse than that. So
which is a piece of glass, which is a wonky ruling.
This is from MIT.
Yes, a video I've played.
The
MIT open courseware.
each
Yes.
black line is about 75 microns, and these
75 microns, so that is 75 microns. Yeah, so that's almost a tenth of a millimeter.
spacing between the black lines
No, there's 1,000 microns. So it's insanely small.
is about 125 microns. It's about 250 lines per inch if you want.
So it's a diffraction gradient. It's not a slit.
This is then the this wonky ruling. This piece of glass with all these narrow slits on it.
Right, so it's a diffraction gradient. It's not a single slit or double slit.
The screen is, as before, is 200 centimeters away, and again, the wavelength of light is 6,328 angstroms.
And there's a big lens there for some reason. See the big lens? Big lens.